In this video, we're going to be looking at how to create a flight on the ops board. The ops board is used to advertise flight events on our dedicated server only for either announcement, invitation, or de-confliction purposes. So de-confliction in this case refers to all of the aspects of your flight that could be in conflict with someone else also flying on the dedicated server at the same time. This includes Callsign, satellite identifiers or Datalink Group and own ID, flight comms, Tack ID, laser codes, and of course, where applicable, area of operation. So let's take a look at how to typically create a flight on the ops board. The first thing you'll notice is that the ops board is divided into two sections, both active and planned flights. So if there were folks actively flying on the server right now, we would see entries in the active flight section. At the moment, there currently are only planned flights for the future. So if we were going to fly, the first thing we want to do is we want to deconflict all of the aforementioned items from flights that may be operating in the same window. In this case, if we were going to fly on the 12th of May, that's today, around the same window as this existing planned flight at 2030, we would need to deconflict from this flight. We would not need to worry about all of these flights happening on the 13th and after, because again, they're not going to be active at the same time. It doesn't matter if we use exactly the same call signs and laser codes, because again, they're not happening at the same time. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to assume that we're going to fly at the same time of this UZI-1 flight. So we know that we should not use UZI as a call sign. We should not use CACI 22 as our flight comms, and we're going to deconflict with both the Datalink Group and own and the Tack ID. So how do we create a flight? First, simply choose create a flight and the airframe you're creating a flight for. The date and time will be populated as today's date and always starting at 0 GMT or 0 Zulu. Now, if we were not to change the start time, noticing that it's currently past 1800 Zulu, then we would be creating a flight in the past, and the system won't let us do that. In fact, if I just attempt to submit here, you'll notice you get a message that says you cannot plan a flight in the past. So I'm simply going to hit my back button and correct my date and time. And because we want to create an entry that's at the same time for demonstration purposes as the existing UZI-1 flight, we're going to choose that time window. Now, obviously, even if we weren't starting at the same time, but we were starting at 21, we very likely will still be active at the same time as that flight starting 30 minutes earlier. So again, we still need to deconflict. Next up is our estimated duration. Now, this is just an estimation, so I'm going to put here 2.5 hours. Now, our flight can be much shorter than this. It can be longer. The way estimated duration works is it simply advertises to other folks that, hey, this flight that's going to be up is going to be up approximately for this length of time. If you go over, it's fine. If you go under, it's also fine. One thing to note about going over, when a flight becomes active on the ops board, if your estimated duration is set for 2.5 hours, if you actually fly for over 3.5 hours, in other words, an hour longer, that flight will automatically be deactivated on the ops board. That does not mean you need to end your mission on the server. It's just that it's no longer being advertised for deconfliction purposes on the ops board. So you want to reasonably guess your estimated duration. It's safer to overestimate the time and remove it because you finish sooner than to underestimate the time and then risk not advertising for deconfliction. Next up would be your package number. When creating a new mission, unless you're combining with an existing flight, always leave new package selected. If you were joining with an existing flight on the ops board, you would choose that package number, which has the benefit of populating your flight's data into the mission data card of the other flights. We will cover mission data cards in another video. Next, we want to choose our call sign. Again, the flight we're deconflicting from is called UZI-1, so we don't want to use UZI-1 or UZI at all as a call sign unless we're operating in the same package and operating together. In fact, you can pretty much choose any call sign you want, typically avoiding call signs that are reserved for specific roles, such as Misty and Sandy, which have very specific roles in the A-10 operation. I'm going to simply choose Baja 2. Next, we want to choose how many ships. Our options are either 2 and 4, and this is fundamental as the 476 tends to view the 2-ship, just as the U.S. Air Force, as the default operating unit. Certainly, you could have a higher concentrated power with 4 ships and for practice purposes. And in fact, you may be flying solo for practice purposes. You would simply select 2-ship and no one would occupy the second slot. We're going to leave it as 2-ship. For default, that will be primarily what you will be doing, certainly throughout training. As you will be starting off in a training environment, 99% of the things you will do at the 476 will have the mission type selected as training. Our Datalink Group. So if we were looking to deconflict, again, Uzi 1 was using Datalink Group 81, which is common for members of the 81st Squadron. As members of the 76 typically choose that, but that is not a requirement. Simply choose a Datalink group and deconflict from existing Datalink groups that will be active at the same time. Flight comms. This will be the comms that you use to communicate with members within your flight. In other words, between you and your wingman. So simply, you want to choose a flight comm that has not already been chosen by an existing flight. By default, most often in the 476, the VHF FM radio is used for flight comms. That is not a requirement, it's just the most common thing to do. And so by default, khaki 11 is set. And simply, if you click the khaki button here, you'll get our frequency table so you can actually see in manual terms the frequency you are reserving. So if I wanted to reserve khaki 32 as khaki 22 is what's being used by Uzi flight, I will simply say 3 and 2, and I know that that manual frequency is 59.3. That will be our flight comms, and I simply choose 3.2 to signal to other folks looking at the ops board that I am reserving that frequency for my flight. Next, I'll put in a description of my mission. And optionally, I can also include the area that I'll likely be operating in. And this is just for convenience to let other folks know that, hey, my flight during this window may be active in this area. If we want to advertise this flight to other members of the 476, inviting them to join us, simply set notifications to yes. And if other members have enabled their notification settings to receive notifications, they will be told, hey, a new A10 flight has been posted on the ops board. We're going to leave this to no for now. You'll notice that your own ID, which is the saddle ID assigned to your ship, is populated. This is derived from the fact that our call sign was Baja 2. If I change that 2 to a 3 or 5, you'll notice, my mouse got a little sensitive there, that the own ID changed to 5-1. And that's because it's showing you the information for the flight lead. Next would be our laser ID. So even though you may not be using a laser or TGP at all during your flight, this is populated by default. And this is choosing your first 2 digits because the last 2 digits will be derived from your own ID. So simply here, we want to deconflict from someone else that's using it. And you'll notice our laser code becomes 1351. Next, our TACAN ID. This is for air-to-air TACAN or yardstick usage. So quite simply, again, deconflicting from what's going to be active, we will choose a TACAN ID. Choosing our own TACAN ID, the system will automatically generate the corresponding TACAN IDs for members who will fly with you. In other words, a member flying with Baja 5 here will be assigned the TACAN ID 73 Yankee, which is plus 63 from the TACAN ID of my aircraft. At this point, I am done creating my entry and I simply submit. Looking at the ops board, as my flight is the next one after Uzi's flight, I can see my entry here. And now other folks who may come behind me and want to fly in the same window can deconflict using my flight's details. I should always, unless planning flights for other people, join the slot of the flight I just created. This has been a short video on how to create a flight using the ops board.